Imagine a dawn where the mist burns copper and 5 dragons, once built as weapons, raise their voices not in fury, but in psalm, each note reshaping trust, memory, and the very future of humanity. This is not just survival. It is the moment where vows are spoken, eggs are guarded, and a new world begins to breathe. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The morning air carried a strange glow, as if the sky itself had been brushed with rust. A light haze drifted across the valley from the towering machines that kept the atmosphere stable. At Aurora Green Sanctuary, Landing Field Lambda spread out in silence, its grass soft and unreal, engineered years ago to look natural. It was a place built not for people, but for dragons who had no place else to go. Milo Ashford stood at the edge of the field, his jacket pulled tight against the chill. Once, he had been a mechanic on orbital stations, fixing machines that circled far above. Now he found himself here, waiting for creatures that many still called dangerous. His hands still carried the memory of tools, but this morning he brought only patience. 5 shapes shifted in the mist. They were new arrivals, rescued from the wreckage of a failed company that had tried to use them as mascots. Abandoned in cages with no food, they had survived through cleverness and will. Now they huddled together, scales catching faint light, eyes sharp with fear. Milo did not approach. He knew better. He walked a few steps into the field, sat cross-legged on the grass, and let the quiet speak for him. The largest of the group, a gold-green male, lifted his head. Light ran across his scales like hidden fire. His tail moved once, slow and careful, a warning not to come too close. Near him stood a copper-colored female, her wings half open, protective and tense. A blue female kept her eyes low. A smaller, red-flecked male pressed close to the others, and a silver one lay still as stone. Files in the office had listed them by number, but Milo gave them names in his mind. Garen for the gold-green, Cora for the copper, Azura for the blue, Brick for the red-marked, and Maris for the quiet silver. Behind Milo, Mr. Kestrel, the director, walked past with his tablet, scanning data without looking up. The man lived by reports, and this morning was just another entry. Dr. Naila Singh, the head veterinarian, lingered nearby with her scanner and a thermos of tea. She nodded to Milo, but said nothing. Everyone understood the first meeting was fragile. Milo spoke at last, his voice calm, steady, as if talking to a friend across the table. "My name is Milo Ashford," he said softly. "I fix things. Sometimes that means machines. Sometimes it means mornings like this. I will sit here, and if you want me to go, I will." The copper female tilted her head. She blinked slow. ... The way a cat might when it decides to trust. The gold-green male rumbled a sound deep in his chest. It was not a growl. It was not a purr. It was something between, something uncertain. Milo stayed still. He knew their kind carried memories stronger than any machine. They remembered every cruelty, every kindness, every broken promise. That was the gift and the burden their makers had given them. He thought of his niece Nora, who had once worked at another facility. She had sent him messages about a dragon who loved to hear soft songs. She said they wanted nothing more than to be understood. Weeks later, an accident ended her life. The report had been dry and cold, but Milo still carried her last words. He lowered his gaze to the grass, and without meaning to, whispered her name. Nora. The gold-green dragon lifted his head higher. His eyes locked on Milo. A sound came, rough, broken, as if dragged from the bottom of his chest. No. Ra. Milo froze. Dr. Singh took a step. Scanner forgotten. Even Mr. Kestrel lowered his tablet. The dragon tried again. Nora. The word came clearer this time, shaped by memory, shaped by loss. Milo's breath caught. His voice trembled. You knew her, he whispered. The dragon lowered his head, close to the ground, and let out another sound. It was low, heavy, but carried a rise and fall that felt like music. Not human music, not exact, but something alive with meaning. Cora pressed closer, her wings brushing Garen's side. Blick echoed the sound, high and quick. Azura lifted her chin and gave a soft note like wind through glass. Maris opened her eyes at last and added a thread of harmony, so faint it made the air itself feel lighter. Milo did not move closer. He did not raise his hand. He only listened, letting the sound reach him. His heart ached, but in that ache, he felt something rare. Recognition. The mist began to clear. Sunlight spread across the field, turning the scales of the dragons into living mirror. Dr. Singh whispered under her breath, "This changes everything." Mr. Kestrel stood silent. No report to write for what had just happened. Milo kept his eyes on the dragons. He felt the pull of fear, but stronger than that was the pull of wonder. The sanctuary had been built for survival, but here, in the rust-haze morning, survival had turned into something else. What the dragons had given was not just sound. It was connection, the first fragile thread of trust. Milo knew the world outside still doubted. But here, in this quiet place, 5 dragons and 1 man had shared a name, a memory, and a promise that the story was only beginning. The field held its breath, and the morning, painted in copper light, carried the first note of a song no one expected to hear. The first morning had opened a fragile door, but the days that followed showed what lived on the other side. Aurora Green Sanctuary became quieter in some ways, as if the staff moved with softer steps, aware that something important was unfolding. The 5 rescued dragons were no longer just silent shapes in the mist. They were voices waiting to be heard. Milo Ashford came to the field early each day. He carried no tools, only a worn guitar that had sat untouched for years. The strings were stiff, the wood scratched, but it still carried sound. He sat at the edge of the field, careful not to cross the painted safety line, and let the instrument rest across his knees. The largest dragon, Garen, watched with steady amber eyes. He was the gold-green male who had spoken Nora's name. Now he seemed intent on learning more. When Milo strummed a single note, Garen gave a deep rumble in reply. It was not exact, but it matched in feeling. It was a beginning, a bridge built out of sound. Cora, the copper female, was the first to create rhythm. She used one claw to tap against a flat stone. 3 taps meant curiosity. 5 taps meant caution. When she made 7 taps with a pause, Milo guessed it meant try again. It was a language of rhythm, simple but powerful. Azura, the blue-scaled dragon, reached for higher tones. Her notes were thin, almost invisible to the ear, yet they made the grass tremble and the air shift. The sound wrapped around the group like a veil, calm and steady. Brick, the small male with red flecks, proved to be an imitator. He copied the call of a bird, the beep of a scanner, even the startled laugh of a guard who passed too close. His mimicry was sharp, playful, and often surprising. Maris, the silver dragon, waited the longest. She stayed quiet for days, observing more than she spoke. Then, one morning, she opened her mouth and released a tone that was not one note, but many. The sound rose and fell in layers, like threads woven into cloth. It carried stillness, but also strength. Dr. Naila Singh wrote in her notes that Maris showed signs of overtone singing, a rare ability that could calm the entire group. While the dragons explored sound, the sanctuary faced new pressure. Inspector Marta Vale arrived with 2 assistants. Her task was to ensure safety rules were followed. Her boots struck the pavement with the rhythm of authority, and her clipboard held long lists of restrictions. "No staff within 50 feet," she said firmly. "No unscheduled vocal experiments. No close contact except in emergencies." Milo nodded, keeping his voice calm. "We will keep the line," he promised, "but let them decide if they wish to cross it." Garen seemed to listen to her words. He rumbled softly, a tone that carried calm rather than warning. Cora tapped her stone in 3 even beats. Brick repeated the inspector's clipped voice with uncanny accuracy, making one of her assistants choke back a laugh. Dr. Singh explained with patience, "We monitor stress levels in real time. Their hormone markers drop during these sessions. Their breathing slows. Their neural activity shifts toward rest. It is not danger we are recording. It is healing." Vale agreed to watch for 1 hour. Milo strummed open chords, slow and even. He paused often, leaving space for the dragons to reply. Garen answered with deep notes, steady as footsteps. Cora tapped a soft beat that matched a heart. Azura added a thin line that shimmered at the edges of hearing. Brick filled the spaces with playful echoes. Maris waited, then layered a harmony so gentle it seemed to lift the air itself. The inspector's shoulders lowered slightly. She leaned forward, watching her monitor as stress markers fell lower than expected. Milo shifted into a simple tune he remembered from childhood. It was not meant to impress, only to soothe. The guitar carried the notes, and the dragons answered. The melody circled back on itself, soft and familiar. When Maris added her overtone, even the inspector closed her eyes for a moment. When the hour ended, Vale spoke carefully. "You will post a safety watch for every session," she said. "You will remain outside the line unless they come to you." But her voice had softened. She had seen something she could not deny. That night, Milo dreamed of mist and voices rising like rivers under ice. When he woke, he carried the memory with him. The next morning, he found the 5 already waiting at the line. Garin lowered his head and spoke again, shaping the word with effort. Miwo, he said, his version of Milo's name. Then he pointed to his chest and rumbled, Gar-an. Korra tapped once, twice, then paused. Azura lifted her head. Brick chirped, proud of himself. Maris hummed softly, as if sealing the moment. Milo felt the word in his chest. He answered in the same tone, Kin. The field seemed to grow larger without moving at all. What began as sound was becoming language, and what began as fear was becoming trust. The sanctuary had been built to contain dragons, but now it was becoming a place to listen. The staff recorded data. The inspector wrote her reports, and the director worried about funding. But for Milo and the dragons, each morning was a lesson in something greater. They were not only learning to make sound, they were learning to speak across the silence between species. And as the sun rose higher, casting light across the gold, copper, blue, red, and silver scales, Milo understood that this was no longer just survival. It was connection, carried in the language of song news, was never supposed to travel beyond the fences of Aurora Green. But sound has a way of escaping. One afternoon, a group of school children arrived for a carefully guided tour. They were supposed to watch from behind reinforced glass in the visitor dome. But a wrong turn and an eager chaperone led them closer to Landing Field Lambda, where the dragons were already gathered. Garin, the gold-green male, stood tall at the center of the field. He rumbled low, his voice steady as stone. The children pressed their hands to the glass, eyes wide. Their whispers and laughter bounced through the air. Brick, the red-flecked dragon with a gift for mimicry, caught the sound and copied it perfectly. The children burst into laughter. Their excitement created its own rhythm. Korra tapped her claw against a stone, matching their rhythm. Azura, the blue-scaled female, lifted her head and released a high note that shimmered through the field. Maris, the silver dragon, closed her eyes and sent out a layered harmony that wrapped around them all. Garin deepened his tone, steady and warm. What began as a playful moment turned into something larger. It was music, built from human laughter and dragon voices together. A teacher recorded a short clip and posted it online before the bus even left the sanctuary gates. By evening, millions had seen it. People watched, not with fear, but with awe. The comments were full of words rarely used for dragons before. Gentle, peaceful, beautiful. The clip spread across news feeds and television broadcasts. The world had seen dragons not as weapons, but as beings who could create harmony. Inside Aurora Green, staff scrambled to respond. Dr. Naila Singh explained the science behind the music, showing data that proved the dragons were calmer when they sang. Mr. Kestrel, the director, held emergency meetings about media requests. "We will not sell them," he said firmly. "We will not stage them. They choose when to sing." But the story could not be contained. Journalists demanded interviews. Musicians wanted to collaborate. Scientists wanted access to the data. Even a theater producer proposed a stage production about singing dragons. The sanctuary had become the center of a conversation much larger than itself. Then came the visit from President Alina Parks. Her advisors had urged her to see the dragons for herself before taking a position on the growing debate over their rights. She arrived with a large security team, reporters, and a dozen cautious officials. Garin stepped forward with quiet dignity. He lowered his head in a gesture of respect, not submission. "President Parks," he said, shaping the words carefully. "Good morning." His voice was broken, but the meaning was clear. The president blinked in surprise, but recovered quickly. "Good morning," she answered. Milo sat with his guitar at the field's edge. He played a simple tune, one meant for open spaces and shared moments. The dragons joined him, each adding their own sound. Garin rumbled a steady bass. Cora tapped a soft rhythm. Azura wove a bright line above it all. Brick filled the spaces with playful echoes. Maris layered her harmonies until the air itself seemed to vibrate with calm. The president's eyes glistened. "I thought I was visiting a research facility," she said softly. "This feels more like a neighborhood." The next day, she announced the creation of a task group to draft what would be called the Drake Rights Charter. It would consider whether dragons should be recognized as individuals, not assets. The news sparked debates across the country. Some feared the risks. Others saw a new chance for compassion. While politics argued, Aurora Green continued its work. Weeks later, 3 scarred and malnourished dragons arrived on their own, drawn by the sound they had heard from far away. They were thin, trembling, and hollow-eyed. Garin greeted them with a soft song. Cora circled to make space. Azura added her high notes, gentle and steady. Maris released her layered tones, wrapping the newcomers in sound like a blanket. Brick imitated their weak cries, then softened them into playful patterns until the strangers relaxed. Healing spread beyond medicine. Sound became therapy. Music became trust. More dragons came. Quill, who created original melodies unlike anything the staff had ever Mimic, who could echo not just sounds but silence itself. Pulse, who tapped rhythms with such precision that researchers called him a living metronome. And Solace, a timid female who stayed hidden, silent, until the others surrounded her with patient kindness. She eventually hummed a tiny note, her first step towards safety. The sanctuary grew, building larger shelters and open fields. Visitors came from across the world, not to see danger, but to listen. Scientists took careful notes. Teachers brought children to learn about empathy. Musicians spoke of collaboration. For the first time, dragons were not seen as threats, but as partners in something new. The hearings for the Drake Rights Charter were held in a temporary pavilion near the sanctuary. Debates were heated. Some argued about safety. Others spoke of dignity and responsibility. Milo spoke only once, his voice unsteady but clear. "They don't need owners," he said. "They need neighbors who listen." His words spread quickly, shared in newspapers and broadcasts. One evening, as the sun set behind the towers, Milo sat outside the field with his guitar. The dragons gathered close, their voices weaving around his chords. The air filled with sound, not just music, but meaning. Aurora Green had become more than a sanctuary. It was a place where survival had turned into connection, and connection had turned into change. The world had heard the chorus, and the world would never be the same. Spring arrived gently at Aurora Green, rolling across the hills with mist and soft rain. The terraforming towers exhaled cleaner air, and the fields grew brighter with every sunrise. For the dragons, the season carried a different rhythm. Their days had changed. What once had been survival was now community, and what once had been fear was now trust. Garen, the gold-green male, and Cora, the copper female, began to circle each other in ways that even the scientists struggled to explain. Their movements were deliberate, filled with meaning no one had taught them. Staff members watched from a respectful distance, whispering that the two were preparing for something greater. Milo Ashford, sitting cross-legged with his guitar resting beside him, smiled knowingly. "They're practicing vows," he said quietly. The ceremony was simple but unforgettable. At twilight, in the meadow beyond Landing Field Lambda, the dragons gathered. The sanctuary staff arrived carrying blankets and tea. Their footsteps quiet on the grass. Dr. Naila Singh stood with her scanner switched off for once, simply a witness. Even Inspector Marta Vale returned, no longer with her rules and clipboard, but with bread from a village bakery. Garen stepped forward first. His voice rolled low, deep and steady, carrying fragments of melodies he had learned over months. It was more than a song. It was a memory, woven with pieces of lullabies, folk tunes, and the gentle harmonies the group had created together. Cora answered with her own rhythm, lighter and brighter, her notes spinning like golden light across the meadow. Azura lifted her voice, adding a high thread that shimmered against the night air. Brick, playful as always, filled the spaces with echoes that carried joy. Maris added her layered harmonies, binding everything together into a sound that felt like home. When they finished, the meadow held its breath. The silence was not empty. It was full, as if the earth itself understood the vows spoken without words. The days that followed brought something no one had dared to expect. One early morning, Milo found Cora curled carefully around 3 pale eggs. They glowed faintly in the soft light, each the size of a helmet, smooth and perfect. Garen stood over them like a wall of gold and green, his eyes alert but gentle. Dr. Singh rushed forward with her instruments, then stopped short, lowering them with reverence. "They're the first free-born eggs," she whispered. Not in a lab, not under orders, but in trust. Fear walked beside the joy. Cora herself voiced it when Milo sat near the edge of the meadow. Her words were halting but clear. What if they cannot sing? What if they are broken, like us? Milo set his guitar on his lap, his voice steady. "You are not broken," he said. "You are more than what was done to you. Your children will have choices because you made room for them. They will not inherit chains. They will inherit your courage." Cora touched one egg with her wingtip, light as breath. Garen rumbled softly in agreement. The weeks stretched slow. The sanctuary prepared for the hatchlings, as if preparing for a new season. Volunteers built paths so visitors could stand far away, but still feel close. Children sent blankets, scarves, and drawings of dragons with music notes floating above them. Mr. Kestrel filled closets with donations and labeled one shelf simply warmth while waiting. One night, the rust haze returned. ... Faint and shimmering. Milo walked out to the meadow, unable to sleep. He found others already there. Dr. Singh with her thermos, Inspector Vale with her basket, and Kestrel with extra blankets. They sat together without speaking, the dragons humming quietly, their tones binding the night in a soft net of calm. Near dawn, a sound broke the stillness. A crack like folded paper. One egg trembled, then split. A tiny dragon blinked at the world, its scales pale gold with darker flecks. Moments later, the second and third eggs broke, revealing a copper-bright hatchling and another that shimmered silver like moonlight. They did not cry. They listened. Garen rumbled low. Cora tapped softly. Azura sent out a high tone. Brick chirped a gentle echo, and Maris layered harmony around them. The hatchlings tilted their heads, then opened their mouths. The sound they gave was a new chord, bright and clean, carrying pieces of every voice around them, and something entirely their own. Milo's throat tightened. He whispered from where he sat, "Welcome home." The sanctuary celebrated with quiet respect. No parades, no cameras inside the meadow. Just neighbors, human and dragon alike, watching new life take its first breath of freedom. The hatchlings slept in a tangle of scales, guarded by their parents, and comforted by the voices of the group. In the weeks that followed, the young dragons grew strong. They learned to step carefully, to stretch their small wings, and to hum in response to their parents. Each sound carried promise. Aurora Green was no longer just a refuge. It had become the first home of a new generation. The story spread, not as a headline of fear, but as a message of hope. The world that once called dragons weapons now called them neighbors. Leaders who had doubted began to listen, and the people, ordinary and curious, leaned closer to the idea that healing could be found in voices joined together. As the sun set behind the towers one evening, Milo sat again with his guitar. The hatchlings hummed along, their sounds unsure but brave. Garen and Cora watched with pride. The sanctuary fields glowed with light, and the world beyond its fences listened. Aurora Green had begun as a place to hold what others had abandoned. Now it stood as proof that connection can grow even from broken beginnings. Vows had been spoken, eggs had hatched, and a new dawn had arrived. The future was not only survival. It was song, shared freely, carrying forward into the unknown.